do. Anyway, Brigitte Gabriel, terrorism expert, chairman of Act for America, the largest national security grassroots organization in the country. Also, Dr. Alan Mendoza, executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, and that's one of the UK's most prominent international security think tanks. Thank you both for joining us. You know, Brigitte, when you see...
Thank you.
You know, I don't want the United States to be in the position of being the world's policeman. I certainly don't want nation building. I don't think America politically commits to win wars, and therefore we should never get involved in them. But when you see images of men, women, and children that are being gassed, there is a line that has to be drawn morally. It's sort of like, you know, if your neighbors, if you hear screams and howling and pain, excruciating pain and some type of violence taking place next door to where you live, you're probably going to try and do something. If we don't set some guidance or have some lines here, then I would assume these kind of vicious attacks, you know, can continue and, you know, it builds into what? How many millions dead?
It will not only continue, Sean, it will also escalate. The world looks at America to set precedent, to basically lead the world. And right now, we are the only superpower of the world. And this type of atrocity, this type of barbaric chemical attack, I mean, we are hearing now, and it is confirmed by U.S. experts, that they have used nerve agents. So it is beyond just chlorine gas. As bad as that is, it doesn't matter what type of chemical attack it is. But in order for you to get to the point where you use nerve gas, killing people in mass, we cannot allow any country in the world right now to get to this point, and we are the only people who can stop such atrocities from happening. And this is why the message that President Trump is going to send to Syria is not only to to Assad, it's also for every thug in the world who is developing such weapons of mass destruction to understand that America will not tolerate the world to get into this type of war.
What's your take, Dr. Alan Mendoza?
Well, I agree entirely. I think you mentioned at the start America's not the world's policeman, and of course it isn't. But collectively, America, the Western world, have taken it upon themselves to stop the sort of willful use of the world's worst weapons, as has happened in this context. It is entirely in our own self-interest and in the interest of everyone living on this planet that we do not allow proliferation of chemical weapons, their use of nerve agents, use of nuclear weapons down the line. That's, kind of a basic position. And I think what's striking about this is how President Trump has come out front and center and made it quite clear it is unacceptable, made it quite clear there will be a heavy price to pay. It will not be simply a one-off strike, I don't believe. I think there's a lot to come on this. And this is in stark contrast to what we saw with the Obama administration in the past. And what's interesting is that when President Trump has led on this, others are following. President Macron of France seems keen to commit. Our Prime Minister Theresa May seems keen to commit. When there is leadership, when there is commonality of interest, we are with the USA in standing up for what is right and decent in the world.
Well, agree totally. Let's go back in time. We'll play Obama setting the red line in the sand about Syrian dictator Assad if he ever does use chemical weapons. Now, we all know the history of this is, in fact, Assad used them and Obama did nothing. And then it wasn't long thereafter that John Kerry was out there, a couple of times. We'll play those actually saying, well, we struck a deal where we got 100% of chemical weapons out of Syria. Obviously not true. Listen.
We have communicated in no uncertain terms with every player in the region that that's a red line for us and that there would be enormous consequences if we start seeing movement on the chemical weapons front or the use of chemical weapons. That would change my calculations significantly.
It was his decision to decide to bomb that helped to bring people together so we could cut the deal that got 100% of the declared chemical weapons out of Syria. And people nevertheless have been critical of one day of bombing versus the virtue of getting 100% of the chemical weapons out of Syria. And I ask any of those critics today, where do you think you would be if ISIL today had access to those chemical weapons in Syria? A terrorist organization with weapons of mass destruction. But because of what we did, we got 100% of the weapons out, and they don't have access to those extraordinary weapons. So I think people need to sort of step back and really measure outcomes. The United States of America has never been more engaged in helping to lead in more places than we are now. I just came back from China, where we are engaged with the Chinese in dealing with North Korea. And you will notice since the visit last year, North Korea has been quieter. We haven't done what we want to do yet with respect to the denuclearization, but we are working on that and moving forward. With respect to Syria, We struck a deal where we got 100% of the chemical weapons out.
Yeah, 100% out. Apparently not, Brigitte Gabriel.
Apparently not. And I was listening to an intelligence analyst this morning. I was talking on the phone. We were on a conference call, and I heard that Assad already have done 8 chemical weapon attacks this year alone. Now, they were not the strong weapons that they used this past weekend, but 8 is too many, and we cannot allow this to continue. It is amazing that these weapons are used today, Sean, in 2018. These weapons have been outlawed by the Geneva Convention in 1925, and right now they are agents that are helping Assad basically use these weapons, even get him weapons like this. We know that Iran and Russia are involved. We know that Iran for sure has a vested interest.
I don't have any doubt about that, but here's the thing. I mean, the president announced that he was going to be leaving Syria, and so the question is, why would they provoke the president further?
They underestimated the president, and they are testing him right now. And the intelligence community is working very hard in finding out who are the players and why they're doing what they are doing. And I hear there are something about to break either tonight or tomorrow, information regarding this. But they are testing him, and I think they are underestimating him because President Trump is different than Obama. 1 year ago, exactly almost around this time, when he bombed that air base, he sent a message to them, don't mess with me. He wasn't you at that time as a president. Right now, they do understand, don't mess with him, and they're going to be very surprised at America's reaction.
Are you really confident, Dr. Mendoza, that, in fact, if we hear something within the next 24 hours, because the president mentioned this yesterday, 24 hours has now passed, are you confident that the president will have allies like Great Britain, like France, involved in any effort, military effort, to at least make some strategic strikes to maybe take out these facilities? So, in fact, Assad stops doing this to innocent men, women, and children?
Well, there are two points in what you've just said. The first is, will he have allies? I believe he will have allies. I certainly believe the French will be on side. I believe there'll be a coalition of Arab states who might be willing as well to come on board. I can't speak for the UK because we've had a rather torrid history when it comes to airstrikes on Syria. We rightly blame President Obama for not having gone in 2013, but he didn't go in because one of the reasons he didn't go in was because our House of Commons rejected the opportunity in a shock defeat for the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, when our own MPs chickened out, cowardly approach to the situation and left the US holding the can. So I can't speak for us, but I know the Prime Minister will be very keen now to go in.
But here is the bottom line, is that, and I think we learned this in Iraq, that at least in the United States politically, there was never the will to win the war. You literally put handcuffs on troops where they have rules of engagement that are so stringent that these guys can barely be even put in a position to defend themselves. And then a war becomes politicized. And then after 5,000 plus Americans die and thousands others injured, losing their limbs, etc., and then we say, well, never mind. And then it ends up descending into chaos anyway. So I just think politically, the only option that is available would be some type of strategic strike. But that's not probably going to stop somebody like Assad that's been willing to do this. What do you think, Brigitte?
Can I just...
go ahead, sure. Dr. Mendoza, go ahead.
And then let Brigitte... I don't think it can just be one quick strike. I think what you have to do is degrade the regime's ability to commit atrocities. That means not simply chemical ones, but also the barrel bomb, the airstrikes, all those issues. I think if you make the price for Assad acting in this way high enough, he will stop doing it. And what we need to do is send a message quite clearly. That
but he's also getting the support of Putin and the Iranian regime, Brigitte.
We know the swiftest action that we can take right now is basically to completely ground his air force, so he will not be able to launch any other chemical attacks like this. You're not going to be able to bomb all military bases and stop all weapons, but at least if we can paralyze his air force, we will be able to at least stop this type of attack in the future and send a very strong message to him. I do not believe that we can just do a drop or a pinpoint attack like we did last time when we attacked one military base. I think right now our government is basically discussing going in and paralyzing all of his air force. The problem that we may run into is we know that there are Russian officers who are now working and present at some of these air bases. So it's going to be taking a lot of warning and communication between us and Russia, telling people get out because we're going to bomb.
All right. Thank you both for being with us. Dr. Mendoza, thank you. Brigitte, thank you. Listen, if you are are a responsible believer in the Second